Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be looking over the dialogue Meno from Plato's 5 Dialogues, the Hackett Classics edition. Here's the book. And yeah, we're just going to go over a summary of it. I'm going to go a little bit into some connections it has with later philosophy. So let's get started. So yeah, first thing I want to talk about is the discussion of the virtues. And if you've read Plato and really all the Greeks, you hear this term virtue a lot. So for Plato in Meno, it's the justice and moderation, the two virtues which are discussed. And of course, the Republic is the main discussion of justice and what justice entails and all that. But in Meno, it's sort of developed like, okay, justice is a virtue, moderation is a virtue. But yeah, there's not much discussion besides that. One of the things that is really important to us is the discussion of kind of gender equality in Plato. There's a couple of good papers you can read from some feminists and stuff about Plato's ideas of gender equality and how they're like kind of changed over time and kind of develop and also sort of degenerate in a sense. So looking at Meno, Plato says that through Socrates, he says that both women and men have justice and moderation. They both have virtue, the ability to have virtue. And the Republic too. He also echoes this notion. It isn't until Timaeus when he says that women are born from birds. But until that point, he's pretty pro-gender equality. Republic considered all things. You have the guardians that can both be women. Guardians, for context, are like the state rulers and such. So yeah, no, Plato can have a feminist lean if you kind of look a little into it, but that's not the point of this video. But yeah, let's get to the next part I want to talk about, which is the immortality of the soul in Plato. And this is very important for a lot of Neoplatonism that comes after it, and even the scholastic theology, Aquinas and people like that. But yeah, looking at Plato's Immortal Soul, it's kind of developed in here and it kind of expands over time and it gets more, we'll say complex and more like developed. Of course, in Philebus, the discussion of the tripartite soul is introduced. That's not here right now, but we're just discussing like, what is the soul? So basically it says, as the soul is immortal, this is on page 71 of my book. As a soul is immortal, has been born often, has seen all things here in the underworld, which there is nothing which has not been learned. It is in no way surprising that it can recollect the things it knew before, both about virtue and other things. Now, discussion of virtue here and other things. So if you go to another dialogue, which in chronological order, it's kind of scholarly assumed that Phaedo is next. And in Phaedo, the idea of forms is applied to recollection. Now, in a lot of later Platonist and Platonist-inspired works, this idea of forms applied to recollection is incorrectly attributed to the Meno dialogue, but it is actually in Phaedo. For instance, Leibniz, in his Discourse on Metaphysics, Gottfried Leibniz, he says that the idea of forms and recollection, and he attributes it to Meno, which is incorrect, but that's just a small little minor issue. But yeah, overall, we can just say for simplicity purposes that the forms are included in this recollection. But yeah, get that out of the way, and now we're going to get to what is recollection for Plato and for a lot of other Neoplatonists and people that Plato has influenced them in some way. So we have the doctrine of recollection, which is found through Socrates from Plato, So basically, Meno, the name of the dialogue, has a slave boy, and Socrates is going to Meno's house to, have a good conversation, chat a bit. Meno is the son of a politician in Athens, so Socrates is pretty connected with the elites, So he's friends with them, and Meno is a slave boy. And Socrates tries to talk to the slave boy, and he tries to see if the slave boy knows things that he doesn't know that he knows. Basically, says, Socrates tells Meno, pay attention to me, and then tell me whether you think he's recollecting or learning from me. So is he actually like knowing this stuff somehow? Or am I just like giving him the answers? And so Meno's like, cool, sounds good. Socrates starts out with, tell me, boy, do you know that a square figure is like this? And Socrates supposedly draws a square. The boy goes, yeah, I do. That's a square. And then Socrates goes, all right, it has lines through the middle, and he draws lines, So this goes back and forth. And a lot of the answers are just yes, yes indeed for Meno slave boy, but there are 11 answers, which I've counted, that the slave boy gives himself. For instance, Socrates says, how many feet is twice 2 feet? Work it out and tell me. And then the slave boy goes 4. So that wasn't Socrates giving him the answer. The slave boy actually knew that, but the thing is, he's not supposed to know that because he's a slave boy, he doesn't have education, you know, all this stuff. So yeah, it just goes through that, and at the end, Socrates goes like, well, he knew things which he does not know that he knows. So how is that true? With a modern spin, with a Freudian analysis, you could say, we would speak of the preconscious ideas and concepts which are then arise to the conscious state through some sort of like primer in the external world. And the primer for this instance could be like a question, kind of like the question of what is a square to this boy. It could have primed him to, maybe he saw a square, maybe he heard like Meno mention squares at some point, you know. We don't have the whole case study of this boy, but the point of this is that there is some knowledge that this boy has, which he doesn't know that he knows, and Meno doesn't know how he knows it. Well, basically, at the end of this, Socrates goes, at first he did not know what the basic line of the 8-foot square was. Even now he does not know, but then he thought he knew, and answered confidently as if he did know. And he did not think himself at a loss, but now he does think himself at a loss, and as he does not know, neither does he think he knows. So he has this knowledge, which he doesn't know how he has it. So yeah, that's basically the doctrine of recollection, that we have some sort of knowledge, which we don't know how we have it. And as such, this knowledge is ascribed to us in our soul intrinsically, because the soul is immortal before this life. And so all knowledge in this world is actually just recollection from a past life, or from the life. The existence of the soul before this life is probably more accurate to say. And this is profound implications, of course. We can look at St. Augustine, who is a prominent Neoplatonist, and Augustine said when he was reading Plato, and this maybe was a little bit of post hoc rationalization, you might say, but he said that he felt as if he's heard these words before, that he's heard these ideas before. This was speaking to the doctrine of recollection. He's reading Plato, he thinks he already knew this, and he has some sort of like recollection in that sense, conscious recollection at that point, that he has already known this stuff. Regardless, another thing this can be connected to is the idea of a monad for Gottfried Leibniz. I'm not going to go too much into Leibniz. He's a whole can of worms. I'm actually working on an essay right now about Leibniz, but I will say that his monad has all events which happen to it are intrinsic to the monad, to its existence. As such, it knows, quote unquote, knows all things. I don't want to get too complicated with this, so I'm just going to say it knows all things, but that's not entirely accurate, but just go with me here. But yeah, so it knows all things, and kind of how the soul knows all things for Plato. And we recollect in our daily lives to find that knowledge which was once lost and have it refound and such. But yeah, I think that that's going to conclude more or less our discussion here. Yeah, more or less. But I just want to go over a little quick summary. So again, justice and moderation, the two virtues discussed here. Both men and women can possess them. The idea of recollection is established here. Very important for Neoplatonism and the philosophy of Leibniz, where you do not know that you know something because what you do not know that you know was known in an existence before this life, your soul existing before this life, the temporal life you live, whatever. And then, of course, this is connected with the forms later. This knowledge or whatever is connected with the forms later in Phaedo, but we're just going to simplify it and say that the forms are connected with this knowledge. And this is demonstrated through the slave boy discussion between Socrates and the slave boy. Yeah, I think that should do it. That's basically a summary of Meno. I highly recommend everyone to read this dialogue. It's very good. It's very interesting. It has a lot of implications for later philosophy. And yeah, that's going to do it. Subscribe and like the video. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.